to Dan's Bar. So today, I know there's no cocktail stuff laid out in front of us. Today we are going to be making a candied pecan. Just because I get so many requests for it, I figure I may as well do a little video on it because it's extremely tasty. It's a takeoff on a super simple recipe, but I make some tweaks that make it particularly delicious. So I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of that. The recipe will be in the description below, so you're more than welcome to take a look at that and not watch the entire video. That's always a great option. And my oven is now preheated, so let's get started. So this is going to be for 1 pound of nuts. This is going to be my third and fourth batch for today. Fourth's going to come later. But essentially we're going to start with 2 eggs. We're just going to take the whites of the egg, keeping the yolks for something else, and putting that in a bowl with about 2 tablespoons of water. Super simple recipe. Alright, to that we're going to add about 2 tablespoons of water, just a splash, whatever, something to get it frothy. And to this, we're going to whip it until it is very stiff peaks like a meringue. We want really nice thick peaks so we can get lots of sugar, lots of coating, lots of bulk on the coating of the nuts as we go. You're loud? Let's get mixing. Alright, to this point, super stiff peaks. So it's very stiff. This is a lot longer than most recipes go for, but this works really well for me. Next up is we're going to add in about a cup of sugar. And I say about because a cup or so, anywhere above that is also good. Make it as sweet as you like, but I usually start with about a cup and overflow it from there. I make it tasty. Alright, so we have, well, may as well kill the bag, you know. Have extra, that much sugar lying around, not acceptable. Alright, so we got our sugar in. We're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, which is this guy. And then 1 tablespoon of everything else. So 2 of cinnamon, and we're definitely going heavy on the pours just because we like spicy, good, flavorful, crunchy, very festive nuts. I don't know. When in doubt, add more spices. So I'm going to do 1 teaspoon of ground cloves to go along with our 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. So and 1 teaspoon of allspice, and this is going to be for 1 pound of nuts. And 1 pound of allspice, and then 1 pound of a ground nutmeg. This is freshly ground, so it's still in the container. So we'll do kind of 1 big teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Excellent. And then I like to add some vanilla as well. If you need to have also no alcohol, don't add any vanilla, but I like to add just a dash of that to give it some more flavor. So this is going to be the base for what we're going to coat the nuts with. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a mix with mixer, and then add the nuts in and get the final mixing done from there. Alright, so we now have this big, gloopy, delicious smelling mess. We are going to add our nuts in tubes. It smells really good. So for this, we're going to use a full pound of a half pecans. Go ahead and nut those all in there, and stir it up, get it nice and really well coated. Once we are fully coated, we're going to put this onto a half sheet pan with a silpat on it. The silpat is kind of important because otherwise most of this mixture is going to get stuck onto the bottom of the pan and not on the nuts where you want it to be. So we are going to use a silpat on the bottom of our baking dish, which happens to be right here. So we're going to take our half sheet pan with a silpat on it and just dump our nuts out onto there. Once we have that on, we're going to spread it out kind of roughly. We're going to be mixing this multiple times throughout the baking process, so it's not critical that it's perfectly spread out, but you kind of get an even layer, avoid big clumpy spots, because that's going to help prevent it from sticking too much and getting a film that you then have to break up. So now that we are broken up, I'm going to go ahead and bake this at 250. Now, most recipes you see will say for like an hour or 2. I go as long as possible, so I've done as long as 5 hours. Initially, you want to stir it about every 15 or 20 minutes for the first maybe hour. After that, you'll see that it's fairly consistent, it's fairly crispy on the outside, and you don't really need to go as frequently. I usually back it off to every half hour at that point for another 2 to 3 hours after that point. So we're going to pop this in the oven, we're going to bake it for 15 minutes, stir it, 15 minutes, stir it, 15 minutes, stir it, and then go to every half hour to get it finished off. And it's going to be done when they're really nice, crispy, nutty, roasty, toasty, and real crispy on the outside. So let's go ahead and get that process started. Alright, I did make a second batch of these. I'm doing 4 this year. In the past I've done 6, 8, many batches, but doing 2 more this year. Putting 2 into the oven now for their first set of baking. So I'm going to pop on 2 different racks. The bottom one tends to bake a bit quicker, but we'll see. We'll give them about 15 minutes for this first round, and then we'll come back for that. All right, we're about 15 minutes in. Let's take a look. Do our first stir. So we can see that we have kind of a little crust a little bit. It's like a meringue that's starting to finish. We want to break that up because we don't want meringue. We want each nut to be individual. At this point, it's still extremely wet. Only the very top part has gotten a temperature where it'll actually start developing that crust. So when we finish, it's still going to look just as wet as it did when we first started. That is fully expected. At this point, it doesn't really need to be broken up much either. Because it is still so wet, we're going to have plenty of time down the road to break up any hairs, trios, chunks that form in the nuts. So we'll just go ahead and break those up and put that in for another 15 minutes. 15 minutes later, half an hour in, let's take a look. Continuing to get that nice little meringue looking top of our things. The tops are definitely dry, the bottoms are still a bit moist, the edges are getting a little bit drier than the center. So we're just going to keep making sure we're nice and stir around. At this point, you are going to want to start breaking up any clumps you see, especially those that are near the edge where we are starting to see that kind of big clumpiness going on. You do want to make sure you break that up. As we go on, we're going to do that every time to make sure that every single nut is separated from all of its friends, because we do want them all to be individually pullable, crispy, and delicious. That is done. We're now half an hour in, so we're going to do another 15-minute batch and then see how they get on at that point. So go ahead and pop the nest back in for another 15 minutes. Hey, we're about 45 minutes in, now it's another 15 minutes. Let's take a look. Now we're starting to get crispy. So this is the point at which we get some crunches going on. The outside is getting really nice and toasty. It's starting to stick a little bit, but because we're on a silpat, that's not too bad, so that's good. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. Yeah, the two big differences that I have from a lot of recipes online is how well the whites are whipped. So I go to really stiff, almost meringue-like peaks, and how long it bakes for. Because if they're worth doing, they're worth overdoing. So I'm just gonna bake the crap out of these, get them nice and toasty. Alright, looks like we got most of them. So at this point, they're nice and dry, they're nice and crispy, they're nice and hard. So now we're going to transition to the half-hour periods, because we don't really need to stir it every 15 minutes, because we don't need to worry about sticking. They're already fairly dry. So now we're going to check it again in half an hour. Alright, it's been about a half an hour. Let's take a look. At this point, we're not going to see a whole lot of change from the outside. At this point, the change is mainly going to be on the inside flavor of the nut itself. So what we're doing is we're roasting the nut inside. Just a little stir to make sure that our nuts are going to roast evenly. We're not going to have any burned ones on the outside, and also just double checking for any ones that have clumped together, getting those separated. Not a whole lot to do here, just kind of moving it around. That one looks great, and putting it in for another half an hour. All right, we're half an hour further in. Let's take a look. Again, at this point, we're just kind of making sure everything is roasting evenly, so just getting these mixed around. Nothing all that special going on here. All right, another half an hour. Check back in. Another half hour passed. Let's take a look. Another stir-rooney. We'll pop it back in. At this point, I'll also take a sample to see kind of how they're tasting at this point. Definitely let it cool off for a couple minutes because it's definitely going to change texture, especially after it's cooled off from the oven temperature. But we'll give another half an hour, see where we're at. 30 more minutes, let's take a look. Either this one or another one around for about there. So if you look closely, the nuts themselves are also getting a lot darker. Focus on this, maybe not. Getting a lot darker, and so you can see that's toasting really, really nicely. That's what's giving it all the nice buttery flavor. And the longer you go, the better it's gonna get. So, all right, we're gonna give it one more round. I'm gonna do 45 minutes this time. And then I think at that point, I'm gonna call these guys done, which will be around about 3 hours or some change. Got another tester here. We'll see how that is, and should be good to go. See you in a bit. All right, I'm calling it done. Let's take a look. So we got 2 pounds of nuts that we have turned into our candy bits. And these guys, it's... Focus? Yeah, we can focus. Looks super tasty, super crunchy, got kind of meringue looking colors on it. These are probably the best candied nuts you'll ever have. The longer you do it, the better you're gonna get. Highly recommended it. Most people I give these to ask for the recipe, so here you go. Enjoy. Have a good one. Happy holidays.